Okay, I want to talk about resentment on the twin flame journey. Um, because it's not really something that I've actually had a great deal of time to think about. But to be honest with you, I think a lot of it is projection. And this is going to be me having a bit of therapy experience for myself. I'm pretty sure, and a bit of hindsight into myself, because there can be a lot like a resentful experience can be really common. I feel like on a twin flame journey, and your main one of your main focuses on in terms of how you see them, because not only is it a distraction from them, because they can be quite a distracting experience, I feel like, and if you actually have the whole obsessional experience phase or experience overall, because the thing is about twins is they're very captivating at times, distracting, and I think people often use negative emotions as a way to block their focus from being removed. And I think this is actually a really positive thing for the true essence and unveiling the true essence of human nature, to be honest with you, because as much as there are a lot of people that want to do wrong and cause chaos, you can argue that a lot of the negative experiences we have and the negative feelings we have towards people and things is through focus, and it's almost a loving way of focusing and attuning to your environment and being in alignment, I suppose, because if you've got focus on one thing, you can't inevitably have it on something else. So if you've got focus on your own life, you can't inevitably have focus on your twin in that very same moment. But you may be distracted if you don't understand that. And I think resentment is one of the many emotions you can use as a way to keep yourself focused, whether you're aware of it or not, whether it's culturally ingrained or not, or whether. So I think another issue is that if one person, I do think culture comes into it, because I think there's different practices and belief systems, religions and things like that, which create environments for some people to have one certain belief system or experience where they may prioritize, or even just in their family, person to person, but let's talk culture here, in that they might prioritize a certain experience and a certain set of beliefs, for example, whereas another culture may not. And I think that comes down to whether you are dealing with a lot of animosity, or whether you're dealing with a lot of openness and maybe other factors, you know, that you might not experience so commonly, or is not as commonly acceptable in one culture as it is in another one. And so there's that as well. But it just reminds you, I feel like, when you do experience these factors, to just be very open. Because, oh my god, I cried earlier today because I saw a set of twins that I've watched on YouTube for a long time. I've seen on YouTube for a long, long time. Didn't know they were twins. But anyway, just the cultural harmony, it shocked me, because these are two people that you can clearly see have, a beautiful connection, but when you look at clearly their upbringing, like sorry, not upbringings, but because I don't know how they're upbringing, but their nationality and the culture that surrounds their nationality, the way they are with each other, like, I don't know how much work and what's gone into their relationship and that functioning, but you can just tell, because what they're doing is that they've clearly, from what I can see and what I experienced from seeing them together, is this very, very profound 444 means take a leap of faith. This very, very, very profound view of adapting one culture for the other person in the twin flame set in the experience. Like obviously that is part of their incarnation to be able to bring that sort of level of adaptability within two cultures. Because let's just get specific here. The guy is like of sort of, I want to say some form of like, I'm terrible with geography, but some sort of like Eastern European level guy, and you've got a very westernized American woman. And I'm not being funny, when you've got like Middle Eastern and Western and Eastern European men, that potentially there's a certain like level of being that goes with that, you know. Often, you know, you can have religions like Muslimism and stuff, and sometimes and you can have experiences and belief systems surrounding quite a strict level of and judgment towards women sometimes. And it's not to hate on those style of people, but that is just the culture surrounding the respect and the way that sort of side of life will operate. Um, and then you've got a very westernized woman who's clearly very in her power, very willing to be very open and loves that about herself openly, that she will test the waters of men's boundaries potentially, or just people's boundaries, because that's who she is. She's a bubbly, fun-loving woman that is clearly in her best power, and all power to her for that. And you've got a man that could be potentially quite disrespectful looking towards her if she feels that there's a level of degradation there. Now, there is clearly no animosity that I can see prevalent in that dynamic that I can see, but it blew me away how, because I'm not being funny as well, like there's levels of that within my twin flame set, and I've got to consider that as well, you know, because it's really it's cultural conditioning, and stuff like that, as part of the dynamic that you are sort of brought into, and the standards you live by as per your you know, where you've originated and what you've been exposed to. You know, I don't know that this man has not always lived in America, but he does have an accent, so it wouldn't shock me if he had moved from somewhere, let's say Eastern European or something like that. It absolutely shocked me though, the clear what's the word? The clear adjustments they'd made for each other within those two very, 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 very different cultures that are very expressive, westernized, fun-loving, bubbly. This is me, you know, take it or leave it. Versus a very potentially strict, potentially slightly misogynistic in some cultural understanding, westernized cultural understanding, very respectful, particularly of men, and have certain standards of what is right, what is wrong, and live by that, you know. And it's just there's a lot. I was shocked. I cried that I was that shocked by this couple that had transcended that sort of experience and that sort of contrast. Like, it blew me away. Like, you know, it was so beautiful. And I'm not being funny, there is levels of that within my twin flame set that I still need to transcend. Because I'm very much of the mindset of like, oh, my twin is so judgmental, and not necessarily judgmental, but very more. I see him like more like the Eastern European kind of, one of my twins, more like the Western European kind of guy, and I see myself, I suppose, more as. But I know I'm also very judgmental. I have to really allow myself to ponder that to an extent, but it's very uncomfortable for me, because I know that there's conditioning that I have and respect that I have for cultures that I have, which really, and I don't think from seeing them it's not necessarily about disrespecting your own culture, but it's about making, as I say, adjustments for a culture that doesn't necessarily on the surface straight away meet those criteria as what is respectful and what isn't respectful. Not to, because I think this has been an issue with my twin. I feel like at times in the past, especially during the honeymoon phase, those adjustments have been made, but it didn't last because there was two weak parameters on that adjustment. So what ended up happening was they were intruding my boundaries to the point where they were overstepping my marks, and I know that I was doing the same, to the point where you both end up being uncomfortable. But that's kind of inevitable with the triggers and separations. I think it's more about creating space and having growth to be able to leave room for things that may trigger you initially, but to manage those triggers to the point of, if you are triggered, to set clear boundaries. And that will, I suppose, take time and growth to understand what you can and cannot tolerate within those adjustments. But there's a reason your higher self and God has designed you in a way. If you have contrasting cultural beliefs and cultural situations with your twin, there will be a good reason for it. Something within your ego, as per your past, present life, your karma in the past, your karma in the future, demands that you make this adjustment for your twin if you want to be in physical union with them. You may have a very, very strict cultural set of beliefs that need to be challenged. At least it's not about changing who you are or changing that cultural belief, but for some reason there has been a situation where there is an experience where those factors play a part in your twin flame dynamic, and that is where the adjustment needs to be made, as I say, for growth and for the divine to do their work within your union, within the collective, and within yourself as an individual. And yeah, I think it's also, I feel like, about observing other twin flame sets and what they have experienced and what they live by, and how they look like they've transcended a situation. Because at the end of the day, it's not about creating a wheel. If there's anything I learned in A levels, it's that copy and paste works. That's how people learn. You have to learn by example. And it's brilliant that in the educational system, I don't know all about the educational system now, but those resources are available. But it's not about recreating the wheel. You're not, but if you see someone that's gone through your experience, you may be challenged in your twin flame set. There's no reason why you can't copy and paste their structure and what might work for them as per your observation, which is basically what I've just done. It's not about disrespecting yourself. I heard from Jeff and Shalia, the hierarchy is God, self, twin, other. So it's not about, if it doesn't sit right with you, it doesn't sit right with God, as per your feeling at that time. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. It says, they say in the twin flame forums and videos and stuff all the time, if it doesn't feel good, it's not good. I do think there is a sense of discomfort, actually, because change is uncomfortable, but change can also feel good sometimes, even though it can be uncomfortable. It's not always about it being pleasurable. I'm not talking about pleasure necessarily, but if it feels uncomfortable and wrong, it probably is wrong. So that's also worth remembering. Well, yeah, I think that's a really beautiful, actually, concept, to be honest, because it's not about, and it sucks that there are hard contrasts within certain cultures, but there is good reason for that as well. It's not necessarily, I do believe that twins incarnate and God makes them incarnate in certain places to clear the collective and clear different grids for purposes in certain places to make way for a functional society in that area and evolution in that place and setting. And different twins will incarnate in different areas in order for that to happen. And God will sort all that out, and the universe will sort all that out for you. I'm not worrying about that necessarily, but it's just the fact of it is a big, profound thing, really. And it's like, as I say, it's not about minimizing self. 444 again, particularly for faith. It's not about minimizing self, but also I feel like that's also coming from my conditioning to an extent. What I'm trying to stress is that it's not about necessarily minimizing yourself, but also for growth to take place, you've also got to take a leap of faith in an area. So obviously, if something does feel like it's going to stretch your ego or stretch your experience, you know, then it's worth sort of leaning into that if it feels like the right thing to do. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, that's also worth it being, because this is a sense of as well within reason, and I think it's just for me. I'm very wary to a level of the boundaries I set within my twin flame dynamics to one level or another, only because I do think sometimes you are kind of shoved in one way or another into change or into faith or trust, because some situation happens where your ego is broken down to the point that you just naturally are chucked into the deep end. So I suppose being as open as you can within a twin flame dynamic can hopefully sort of remove potentially some chance of those big things happening, in order to keep things as grounded as possible, you know. But but yeah, it's worth sort of mulling that over, really, because it's also sometimes just taking a leap of faith and being like, you know, this is not what I normally do, but maybe there's a reason for that, because that's how I'm supposed to evolve, you know, that's how I'm supposed to move into this place, you know. And and there are rewards from it, you know. It's not about, I think it's so important to hold your boundaries though to a level, because if you don't communicate, it's all about communication within twins as well, within functional 3D experiences with them. You have to repeat your boundaries like with anyone, because they are not you. As much as you have like the same consciousness, all they're going to do is reflect back at you. If you have weak boundaries, all they're going to do is test your boundaries, so you can build those boundaries and strengthen them and communicate them functionally like any other relationship would, you know. And if you won't do that, then again, it's just always going to create chaos. To go into it, first of all, with very structured boundaries is going to be, as I say, something is holding me back from really pushing that point, because at the same time, culture and stuff, you know, will have a factor as to do with how measured you are in which aspect. You know, you always got to have some sense of openness and willingness to understand that people and human beings are very adaptable to many circumstances. So that's also part of it, you know. So yeah. Because they're always going to test you, and they're always going to. That's the brilliant and also terrifying and very triggering and also very stressful part, I suppose, and frightening in terms of if you don't want to have a chaotic dynamic and you want to just have a peaceful life, which most people do, and you know you can have that peaceful life by yourself. I think it really, as I say and reiterate, they will always push you to grow. But I think, as I say, the most growth comes from the separation phase, and it comes from the point before really a full reunion. Because, as I say, as much as I have had reunions with various of my twins, in particular one I'm in no contact with now, as much as I've had reunions there from time to time, but I have had a very long period of no contact with them recently. But really, I've not had a very grand overall reunion with them to the point where it's like, we've cleared all our triggers, we've cleared this, I'm an empty vessel, you know, whatever degree that is intended at this experience, you know, I've not had that real reunion. I'm still in theory in separation, and technically and physically in separation with one of my twins. You know, not in the 5D. I'm very connected to them in the 5D, and I feel like a lot of growth has come from that. But also, yeah, in the 3D, like you want to be very healed, and you want to be very secure within yourself, and, as I say, priority God, priority self, before you are going to bring another human being, be that your twin or any other person, into your existence that you might have found chaos with in the past, it's never, ever, ever going to be functional, and the first priority to be in a very, very triggered place and bring your twin into that, because all they're doing is mirroring that you. They're mirroring your own dysfunction. So if you need time and compassion for yourself to heal, do that, because that's what they're doing to you. If they're not having contact with you, it's from a place of compassion, because they know that you will be triggered, because they will trigger you, and they don't want to trigger you. I've heard particularly feminines, masculines get all excited when separation, when reunion is starting to begin, because I do get feelings sometimes that reunion is in the near kind of future for me and one of my twins. But I do feel like I do get that sense sometimes. I'm being the masculine. I feel like I've gotten to a place where I've been very sort of excited about it, made a level of contact with them. I don't want to get into all the details of the experience at this time, but they are still in no contact with me. But it's because I've mentioned in the short recently that feminines particularly don't want to trigger masculines, and they are very kind of, they faff around and they make sure everything's cool and tested and everything before they're willing to actually contact you